but I did hear reports that Martin was mistreated, that at
He was
times...
tortured. There was agreement between them and the Tas police that they would basically work a confession out of him. Put him in arm bars, they'd flex him up, and they put him under extreme amount of pain until the point that his opinion changed.
Welcome to the Wasp Files. Some of this material may be distressing and viewer discretion is advised. It's generally common knowledge that the Port Arthur Massacre, which was one of the worst massacres committed in our nation's history by a lone gunman, didn't, however, warrant a Coronial Inquest, a Royal Commission of Public Inquiry, or an open trial. In essence, the only thing that placed Martin Bryant in prison for consecutive life terms was an alleged confession and subsequent guilty plea. Following the massacre, Martin Bryant was incarcerated at the Risdon Prison complex, mainly in solitary confinement, for approximately 5 months. During that time, Martin held staunchly a not guilty plea, until 5 months later he changed the plea to guilty. As a result, there was no need for an open trial where witnesses would be brought forward to give first-hand testimony, where evidence, hard evidence, DNA, ballistics, fingerprints could be tendered, proving 100% the culpability and guilt of the shooter himself, and that where Martin Bryant himself could be cross-examined in a court of law. However, what if I told you that Martin Bryant's confession was extracted under a directed, protracted and sustained campaign of physical and psychological torture? And I don't mean mistreatment, I mean torture. Over the 9 years of exhaustive research into the Port Arthur Massacre, I have spoken to many people directly and indirectly involved with Port Arthur, including the police, survivors, victims, families, people who knew Martin Bryant, people who grew up with him, and people who also went to prison with Martin Bryant and guarded him in prison. What has recently come to light from first-hand credible testimony from ex-guards who worked at the Risdon Prison complex was the allegations that Martin Bryant's confession was directed to be extracted under torture, and that this took place over the many months that he was interned at the Risdon Prison complex. Tonight's episode will be featuring the testimony of one of these guards who has come forward bravely and provided confirmation of these allegations. This person initially was quite willing to provide their identity and to provide names and dates in association with the allegations that have been made. I ask that all keep an open mind in relation to this episode. Guilty or innocent, every Australian citizen is afforded protection under the United Nations 1948 Charter, under basic human rights, specifically in this case the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman and Degrading Treatment and Punishment. As a result of these allegations, I have followed up with the Australian Human Rights Commission and also with the Tasmanian Correctional Health Services Department, of which I have so far received no response, in relation to Martin Bryant's treatment, his overall health, and these allegations of serious and sustained torture. This episode tonight will take place in 2 parts, with 2 interviews that were willingly provided by the whistleblower, who is afforded every protection under the Whistleblower Act. I have, however, for his protection, maintained his anonymity and concealed his identity. The date today is Wednesday, the 7th of May, 3:28 p.m. I'm going to call an ex-guard at Risdon Prison who has some insights into Martin Bryant. His number is 041. Calling him now.
Hello.
Hi, it's Paul Moda.
How you going, mate?
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah, thanks for reaching out. It's good to finally chat.
Yeah, it's a bit of an oddball one. Like I say, when I left school, I became an infantry soldier at 17, and I served in the... I know how things work. I'm not saying I'm a conspiracy theorist, but fucking a lot of things don't seem to happen just by coincidence either, so I'm just wary about what I say.
Yeah, look, I understand that. I've had a lot of people reach out to me, and I'm very, very careful to protect their anonymity. It's important, it's a safety thing as well.
Yeah. Well, so as I say, I grew up here in Tasmania. So, yeah, I joined the army at a very early age. I served over in East Timor. Basically was just an infantry paratrooper. I left in... Then came home, became a mechanic for a bit, and then started working over at the jail as a correctional officer. During that time, because of... They obviously liked anyone with any military background because it kind of suited to what they were trying to do. At the time, the jail was pretty heavily run by gangs that they had over there, and they needed to kind of get the upper hand and take the jail back, which is what we were part of the task force in doing originally. I was only ever in the high max and behavioural management units, being your Huon, Tamar, Franklin, those kind of units, and the Mersey unit, which was, it was either to be a needs assessment unit, so if an inmate came in, they got the inkling that they had mental health issues or were unstable to some degree or suicidal, in fact, that's where they'd be put. And they'd be housed between there and what was called CSU, which was a critical support unit where you're basically on suicide watch. So when I started at Risdon Prison, Martin Bryant, and for quite some time prior to that, wasn't housed at Risdon Prison at all. He was housed at the Wilfred Lopez Centre on top of the hill. He'd been there for, to my knowledge, at least 5 to 6 years prior to me coming along, which would have been 2011 I started over there. So he was brought down to us in the Mersey unit following what we were under the belief of. He had how did they word it? It came across as he was developing a relationship with a female nurse up there that was inappropriate. So he was moved back to the Risdon Prison complex. So there he was housed in the Mersey unit as a full-time resident in that unit. Having grown up in Tasmania and, being around firearms and seeing everything that unfolded, I was naturally interested in what had occurred. So I started asking some questions. There was a very old culture amongst a lot of the older correctional officers that worked in the Risdon Prison complex. It was a hard one to be amongst. They had the kind of... An inmate, you wouldn't speak to you unless you spoke to them. They were basically scum and you treated them as scum, which I didn't believe. But they'd already been judged. I was only there to make sure that everything kind of occurred as it should. So...
I have heard some distressing things about some of the guards at Risdon. Obviously, most of them were probably fine, but I did hear reports that these are from some ex-guards who'd left the prison complex, that Martin was mistreated, that at times...
tortured.
Yeah, he was. They said he was wheeled into the shower, into the hot shower, handcuffed to his wheelchair, and you could hear the screams through the cell block.
Yep. So, where you were talking about Martin's initial housing in the Risdon Prison in the old complex up the top, which is now like a training area. So, out the back of that, you have about, I think it's 6 cells, and that predominantly back in the day was used as the health centre as such. They did build a independent cell at the very back of that unit for Martin himself, but I don't know that it was ever used for that purpose. I believe that in the end it just went over to the dog handlers and they did the dog handling bit out the back of it. But from what I was told, initially when Martin was housed, they kind of worked on building a group to deal with him. And predominantly that was ex-service personnel that were correctional officers at the time. And one of the big ones being, and this is a very dodgy name for me to even say, but this is the name I'll give you. I'd probably prefer you don't say it off in relation to me off any kind of point of view, but was the big name that comes to my head. So what they did is there was agreement between them and the Tas police that they would basically work a confession out of him. He was an ex-naval PTI, so they would get him up and while he was in bandages, they'd make him move, they'd put him in arm bars, they'd flex him up, and they'd put him under extreme amount of pain until the point that his opinion changed. The other correction officers that were there, they would get laser pointers and go past his cell of a night with laser pointers pointed into his cell, scared the shit out of him. To this day, he will not go outside. So I've been into his cell. He has no personal items. He's got nothing. If we'd asked the rest of the inmates if they want to go on the oval for recreation, he will not go. He will not leave his cell. He will not leave the cell block at all, really. Like, even if he's got a health appointment, it's usually done after hours and he's taken up independently of that. The other inmates don't tend to give that much of a shit about him anymore. He's no one to nothing, and never was. That was kind of just hyped up by the media that, they were going to kill him and so forth. I don't think that was maybe, first off in the initial thing, maybe, but not so much as later transpired. They did develop a crack team as such to try and change his opinion, and the blokes that were still there when I were there before I left, they held themselves in high opinion for doing that.
That's, that's quite disturbing. Obviously, even given the heinousness of the crime and his perceived guilt, torturing people in prison is thought Australia's beyond that. But I heard some pretty horrible things, and that's.
They used to have a sorry pole. They'd chain people to a sorry pole, bash the shit out of them of a night, and leave them there. At one stage, a lot of things changed when the new prison was built, but a lot of the culture of the old guards, especially, it remained behind, and that was especially one of the leading factors as why the jail was so volatile, is that a lot of the long-term inmates had come from that culture prior, and that's why they were hostile.
Yeah, look, I guess Tassie's a bit of a rough place. Go further, it's a dangerous place. And I know that some of the inmates in there, the whole place is a bit of a law unto itself, and it doesn't surprise me that it would be very heavy-handed down there in all regards. But what really concerns me is the nature of Martin's incarceration for 5 months, where he held a not guilty plea, and then after that plea changed to guilty. And hearing some of the stories suggest that if that confession was coerced, particularly violently, then, that certainly cast a lot of doubts on the veracity of his guilt.
Well, yeah, look, to my knowledge, he was always going to plead not guilty, and it was just by them actually working him consistently. Like I say, it's like they nearly, between the Tas police and the jail, it's almost like they handpicked a series of group of people, the individuals that would deal with him, and that's what I was told had occurred. I left the jail, 2018, so there'd been a hostage situation where another bloke had been taken hostage, and I ended up taking his place and was held at knife point for a couple of hours till they arranged my kind of release.
Wow.
I was awarded the Australian Bravery Medal for that. I'm hoping that by saying that you might go, okay, so this bloke's not full of shit.
That's very honourable of you. You obviously have a good heart as a guard, and an act like that is putting yourself in danger, so that's very brave.
Yeah, well, it was just a bad day at work, but it's not something I wanted to accept. It took a lot of coercion to do it, but that's what I say. I suffer with a bit of PTSD and so forth these days, and interestingly, I was a machine gunner in the military. I was a stocky little fella, so I always got stuck with a Minimi or a Mag 58. Interestingly about that explosion that you were saying about in the breach, the only time I've ever seen something like that occur is basically if the weapon's hot and you're basically cooking something that the round cooks off in the chamber with the breech undone. Like you're trying to eject the round and the heat in the barrel actually causes that round to explode. It's a bit of an odd one. I've never seen one go to that degree. Like if we had that in a say a Mag 58 in the military, you try to eject the round. If it doesn't eject, you then say cook off, wait out, and then you wait a minute before you try and eject it again so that it doesn't do that very thing. So that's an odd one. So yeah, I did speak to Martin a fair bit. I tried to build a bit of a rapport with him while I was in there. And I've heard other people say, I don't know, sorry, I've got a cold at the moment too, but
That's right, yeah.
I have heard other people, whether it's on through your station, that say that it is very hard to maintain a conversation with, and I'd say that's fairly correct. You've kind of got to prompt him, if anything, to kind of continue a conversation. But I got to a point where, morning hygiene, I could get up. Once we were doing the hygiene bits, I'd sit out there and watch sunrise with him in the morning, and we'd have a bit of a talk about what was going on. He did say to me at one stage, I stirred him up. I said, something about marijuana or something. I said, you just make a bit of weed back in your day, wouldn't you, Mum? And he said, do you know that he goes, in 1993, an ounce of weed was worth more than an ounce of gold? I thought, oh, that's odd. I took it on board. I was the one that threw the toilet paper roll at him. He asked for a roll of toilet paper. I was elevated above him. So our guard bit was probably maybe 4 foot higher. So where we were sitting was at their head height. So I grabbed him a roll of toilet paper. He was probably no more than 5 to 6 metres away from me, if that. I threw it to him underarm and it hit him in the head. And I thought, fuck me, for a bloke that's supposed to have done this kind of shit, knowing, what kind of level of training I had to be at to be able to achieve that kind of stuff. The math didn't really add up. And I did ask one of the sites, I said, what's he on? And it was basically, no, it's just a sleeping thing. He's not on any type of, any type of mental, nothing that would indicate, anything that he's got a major mental disorder or anything. I never did get to the point where I asked him about the shooting and that, because it was kind of drilled into us that if you did that, he'd go downhill and that it would be your fault. He'd end up in the CSU on a suicide attempt and they'd put 2 and 2 together and so forth. It was very heavily moderated. He was the only person in there I knew of that did not have access to the Arunta system, being the phone system. He had no access to be able to call any of his family or anything. If his mother wanted to make an appointment to have a visit with him, she had to actually send it in writing to the visitors centre, and then they would send that down to him and he'd reply yes or no, and then they'd organise a date from there. His visits were usually low impact visits, or at times where it was not a high influx of other inmates in the area at the time. The RPC security section, they are contacted frequently about people wanting to speak to him or answer letters, and they just won't let it happen. They deny it. Nothing ever gets through to Martin at all. He has no decision on that point. So,
yeah, I tried to contact him. I sent a letter with a self-addressed envelope that he could post back giving me permission, and I didn't hear anything back. I contacted the prison and they sent me a letter saying that my letter had been seized as a risk to prison security and I was denied access without even applying.
Yeah, well, I have no idea how that would be deemed a risk to prison security at all, because there is no risk he doesn't leave his cell. He couldn't even tell you how to get from A to B. So, yeah, that's just the way they are. I don't know why, but it's odd. A lot of things about it are odd. So,
yeah, the whole thing, I've investigated it for 9 exhaustive years, and look, I've got a scientific mind, despite what everyone may say, so I've certainly looked at both sides. The whole thing is just an enigma. There's a lot of weird stuff that's unresolved, and the only reason I want to push for some kind of reopening is so that we can resolve those questions and move on.
Well, I mean, my gut instinct, and that's only my gut instinct, is that I believe that Martin had some hand in it to some level. I don't know what level, but I don't think that he has the capability to do everything that occurred on that day single-handedly by himself. It just does not make sense to me. I can't see how he can get to point A to point B. If I was to say how that would have occurred, it would have been the closest thing I could say that would have happened that day would have been a miracle for him to be able to achieve that. And that's that. So,
in your dealings with him, did you ever feel there were two Martins, that there was kind of like an unintelligent, silly, inane Martin, and that there was also someone that might have been clever, a little bit intelligent?
I didn't get that there were two Martins at all, but I get that what the public's perception of him, when they say like the mental capacity of a child, yeah, not his responses and that. He would laugh awkwardly at certain things and bits and pieces, but he was not by any means what I would call, I've seen people with the same intellect as a child, like a 6, 7, 8-year-old is what they say. And I wouldn't say that. I would say he was definitely a little slow. He was by no means stupid at all. So I think you had to build a certain level of trust with him, which even it seemed like it was a bit weird in itself to do, but in order to get him to speak to you without reservation, it's almost like you needed to build a little bit of rapport with him, which is what I did. But like I say, I regret the fact I didn't ask him. I think that was, that it was more so of the threat being from above that kind of pursued me not to. So,
I mean, I spoke to some inmates that actually said that he had a kind nature, so that if one of the inmates said, look, if I needed cigarettes, he'd always ask me, do you want some cigarettes? He had a sort of a polite, gentle nature is what I've heard. But of course, there are reports that he had attacked some guards in Risdon as well, so I'm not sure. I was trying to get a handle on this guy's character.
Well, I'd never seen him violent in any way. And I'd heard of the same similar kind of reports, and the interesting thing was that when he was moved from the Wilfred Lopez Centre down to the Risdon Prison complex, which again, they're two different, it's not like our workers will go up and work with there, like they're two separate places, nothing carried over. So like we had what we called we used to call it KISS, but it was a custodial information system. So if anyone had played up or, you could basically go through from the point of when the system was instigated and they were incarcerated and read all their notes of any riots or anything that had occurred in it, and there was nothing. There was nothing to that stating anything otherwise. I always kind of found him to be kind of jovial, he never smoked to my knowledge. It was more so, he'd buy chocolates or shit like that, but I wouldn't deem him as the kind of person that would hurt another inmate or anything. I would actually say it's not something that I would have expected or thought.
Yeah, it's starting to come out, I guess. I'm getting a handle on this guy's character. I did understand that Risdon had at one point been investigated itself. There was an inquest into the way that prison was run due to some of the brutality that had occurred. I did hear that some inmates could pass away, whether that was by the hands of other inmates or other means, without going into too much detail, that people could die there.
Yeah, well, there was a royal commission, I believe, into the jail I think that started around 2008. So, I mean, most of what I saw, with the exception to a couple of things that weren't anything notable, like the management of the jail had done everything they can to try and change the way that it had been run for years, and a lot of those older hands have been moved out of positions and have no longer have employment within the jail either. So, yeah, I mean, you blokes like your Tony Burley and that get on social media and preach how much of a piece of shit Martin was and this and that. That's the same bloke that gassed out a fucking a visit centre with children and everything in it because the inmate was in there that he didn't like. He's a piece of shit. So, yeah, there's a lot that goes on behind closed doors.
I would love to interview you, and if need be, totally anonymously, so you could be a silhouette, but that's up to you, of course. I don't want to in any way jeopardise your standing, but that's fascinating insight. Are you in Melbourne, by the way? Or
I'm in Tas, yeah.
You're in Tassie?
Yeah, and I can't see that there'd be too many dramas coming forward with a few bits and pieces. I don't really want to drop the names like I have. Because
I can only stress it's very, very important to me, your anonymity and your safety. And respect as well. What I often want to do when I reach out to people is I want to hear their stories, what they went through. I mean, that's fascinating that you put yourself in harm's way as a hostage. And also, I've got the highest respect for people that serve.
No, thanks for that.
It's just, they often don't get the recognition they deserve, and they do see a lot of things that they can't unsee. So, hats off to you.
Yeah, certainly. You've got my email. If there's any questions that you might think I may have some insight into, I may or may not, but feel free. I'll ask them as honestly as I can. So.
That'd be great, mate. Look, once again, thank you so much for reaching out. All right, Chiefy. Let's keep in touch and speak soon.
All right, Cobber. No worries.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Okay, the time is now 3:56 p.m. on the 7th of May 2025. Very interesting conversation, pretty much confirming that Martin's confession was tortured out of him in Risdon Prison, which is, I've heard before. The second part of the interview is an additional conversation that was held where the whistleblower had provided more information and also agreed to meet to be filmed on camera and to give first-hand testimony, even willingly providing their identity. All from at 11:28. Hi, how you going?
Good, mate. Yourself?
Yeah, flat chat. Pretty busy at the moment.
Yeah, I'm a bit the same myself at the moment. But yeah, so what are you thinking with this? I mean, Wednesday the 11th, probably somewhere between, I don't know, I suppose we'll leave Mansfield probably around 9 or 10, probably be back towards Melbourne by, say, 2, an hour or two spare before I've got to get on the boat. So if that's any good to you.
Absolutely. Or we could come to you, or where do you want to meet? I mean...
like I say, we're just heading towards the boat. I'm not real schooled on where's where and what's what, but just somewhere that's easy for me without having to go too far out of the way or into the city with that big hunk of shit on the back would be good. But
well, look, closer to, we'll touch base and I'll figure out where you are and we'll catch up and, I don't know, buy you guys some lunch or something and a late lunch and we can have a chat and...
I've been thinking about it. I don't really... It might piss a couple of people off, but I don't really give a shit. If you want to record me saying something, if that's the scope of what you're trying to do, like I won't release any names of the individuals that were involved because I don't want to get in any lawsuits or anything, but I'm more than happy to tell you what I told you before, more or less, without naming anyone, because that's my truth and that's what it is. And my thoughts, I actually watched a couple bits again last night. I watched a bit with Wendy Scare and that, and I actually thought, well, I'm only a very small piece of the puzzle, but if it brings anyone else out that may have more to say, I don't know whether Martin's basically guilty or he's innocent, but if it prompts some more talk, then maybe it's worth doing.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I'm happy not to name names, and also, if you want to just remain anonymous, you can do that too. It's no drama. I can blot out photos and change the voice and all that stuff electronically. And
Yeah,
I've
I
had,
think it gives more. Like I say, I've got nothing to hide, so I think it gives it a little bit more validity if my face is there and it's actually me who's saying it. I'd rather do it that way. I don't care what anyone writes in comments. It's not my opinion, not my bother of other people's opinion. So, yeah, no, I think looking at it that way, I think I'd prefer to do it just me as me, and just what I've got to say is pretty much what I've said to you. So,
well, it was a long time ago, so a lot of people are just going, oh, yeah, whatever. But I think it's very important information. It gives you a chance to have your say. A lot of people didn't get a chance to have a say, and I'm always interested in their stories.
Well, I think the thing being is, I guess, when I think about it, at least you've got someone of an independent nature that's actually spoke to him over the course, made some level of character assessment, whether that's a professional one or not, but at least there's someone that's actually spoke to him in person, and they can take it for what it is.
Yeah, indeed.
That's my thought.
I've had actually quite a few ex-guards come forward and just pretty much confirm what you've said, that they treat him pretty horribly in there, even today, but he was certainly treated pretty badly over the years that he has been in there. And some of them were very distressed about what they saw, and then left the prison and, thought it was not really a very nice place to be. So, yeah, I was speaking to a couple of them. A lady by the name of and she said she worked there, and she sort of formed not an attachment with him, but, was trying to kind of be a bit kinder. And she reported some pretty horrible stuff where the guards were shining red laser lights on him, and he'd be curled up at the end of the bed thinking that snipers would shoot him through the window, and so they would say, oh, yeah, we can get you from here, and shine their lasers on him and stuff.
Yeah, no, the same things was reported to me. I mean, one of the weirdest things with him, which I probably can say to you the other day, like I say, I got friendly enough to sit next to him most mornings and watch a bit of sunrise, and I actually took the approach of more kind of taking the piss on the light side of things with him, just having a giggle. And I did say to him, they used to call me Tats, I've got a lot. And he did say to me, he goes, what are you up to on the weekend, boss? I said, not much, Martin. I said, I think I might go shooting tonight. And because I was going shooting a lot back then. And he said to me, all right. He goes, yeah. And then this weird little grin on his face, and it said, what size rifle do you use, a 5.56 or 7.62? And I grinned, and I thought, you cheeky bastard. But that's, I've never seen him in all the years that he was incarcerated, that not once have I heard an incident where he instigated any type of violence or anything towards anyone else or anything like that either. So it's really strange.
Yeah, that's interesting. There were reports that he had been violent, but I guess you have to take everything that comes out of Risdon with a grain of salt, because it's all controlled. He's very controlled in there. He's shadowed by guards and has to be apparently very careful what he says when he talks to people, otherwise they take away his privileges.
Yeah, well, nothing was really brought forward from a level that I could see, but there was definitely, my goal at the end of the day was to actually get close enough to him to ask him at some point, but they kind of put the stigma around it. You ask him and see what happens, because he'd basically end up self-harming or something like that, from what I was gathered. And, I wasn't the best of friends with security and that anyway. They were just a bunch of arseholes. But, yeah, no, it's just a very strange setup. And like I say, I'd never seen him even leave the unit. It was funny, you actually mentioned about the bloke in that latest episode I shouldn't say bloke, but the transgender person that committed suicide hadn't been there. That was a bloke by the name of Martin Harwood, or Martine. Had a bit to do with him or her as well. And lovely kind of person, but a bit of a drunk. But he actually, when Martin got out last time, he actually inhabited the cell where they come from. Because they were pretty involved with the horse racing industry and that. And he had a few pictures of horses and that. And Martin never had any pictures or anything, nothing personal in his cell. And when he adopted that, he just kind of had the pictures that Martin had left him up, Martine. And it was really weird. No phone contact, anything. So just a very, very weird scenario.
So they didn't really allow him to even have some of the basic requirements of prison, to be able to put some pictures up on your cell wall. And
I don't think it was. We weren't told of anything that was mandated as such, but it just didn't appear that he had anything, or that he over 20. What was it? Well, however, 20 plus years he's been in jail since I was there. He'd not received any birthday cards or anything and had anything on display from his family as a unit or anything like that, which was weird. And like I say, and not having the Arunta system, which is, I think it actually comes under, your Justice Act of being able to provide an inmate. That he didn't have that at all. Like his mother, Carleen, if she wanted to book a appointment, it was all done for a phone call to VRC and then a note sent down to him to say whether he wanted to do it or not. And it was just a weird scenario. Yeah, he always seemed at ease with it. He never complained, but very different. I mean, even when they put him up in Wilfred Lopez, that's not really what's deemed to be a controlled judicial environment. They will take people that have been classed as mentally insane or so forth, but we had a lot of people that I would deem far worse than Martin Bryant, far more violent, really some major schizophrenic or split personality kind of issues, and they wouldn't accept any of them. And he was up there for years, and you were told not to really talk about it.
Yeah, you'd think that he would be considered, one of the most dangerous inmates in Risdon, but some of the testimony I have from inmates was that he was quite polite, very generous, just amiable and talkative, and wasn't a danger to anyone.
No, he posed seriously zero threat. And if anything, like I say, in that yard he was being the Mersey unit, he did have a tendency to get, usually it was, people that fell through the cracks that had some pretty severe mental issues in a lot of cases, and you couldn't house them in other parts of the jail because, they're basically deemed vulnerable or, there's a high chance that they'll get picked on or whatever else. And you did get some violent people in there, but while I was in there, Martin was in there. If there was a fight or something, he wouldn't move towards it. He's the kind of person to move away from it. He's not an individual that I could equate with violence. It just didn't seem to make sense.
Yeah, that's the mystery of the whole thing. I mean, this person was allegedly committed one of the most heinous crimes in Australian history. But as to his character, I've found out a lot more that sort of flies in the face of that. It doesn't, of course, mean that he didn't do it. That's still yet to be really determined with fingerprints and DNA and all that have never been released. But his character is far from being this kind of horrendous, sadistic, violent person. So it's a contradiction in terms.
See, the other thing being Richard McCready, I'm pretty sure would have been the Commissioner of Police in Tasmania at that point. You talk to the oldest inmate criminals and even the older officers, he has a very, very solid reputation of being corrupt and crooked. So,
Well, look, I have a lot of respect for the police and the people that serve and carry out our justice duties. Most of them are great. Of course, you've got some pretty rotten apples and, you sort of have to balance it off.
The biggest problem over there is you kind of had two cultures, and it was just whichever one could have the most influence. And the turnover of staff at Risdon Prison and everything over the years, it's just been monumental, and a lot of it is within inside the prison itself. It was back in those days because They used to call it the Risdon roadblock. So if you dobbed someone in for doing something bad, or they went on with an inmate, they'd get you out of there. They'd make sure they'd make your life hell. And even to the point of there's ways and means to get inmates to do things. And even back in those days when smoking was okay, a pack of White Ox, if you could get one to an inmate, it went a long way with what you could get for that, if you can hear what I'm saying. So
yeah.
No. But yeah, I'm happy to speak, and I think, like I've said, having thought about it and kind of washed a bit of the paranoia of it away, I'd probably rather do it filmed as a person that I am. I can't really envisage any legal issues from it because I'm not naming names, and really it's only the accounts of it from what I've been told and my own personal experience with him. So, yeah, I don't give a shit who it upsets.
Well, I've got your back for what it's worth, and I'm a very capable person, but, I want to make sure that, you feel comfortable talking out. But, yeah, I'm at great pains to protect the reputations and the people that have come forward because, that's a courageous thing to do, and your input is very, very valuable and very much appreciated.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So, yeah, well, like I say, I'll probably be pretty buggered on the Sunday. If you were to give me a call, say 10, 11 on the Tuesday, and we can figure out where I'm going to be on the Wednesday on the way back through and sort it out from there, maybe.
Yep. You got it, lock it in. Yeah, well, I'll take you out, we'll have a nice meal.
Yeah, for sure, not a problem.
And yeah, we'll catch up.
All right, sounds good.
Thanks, Chief. You take it easy, and speak to you when I do.
All right, mate. Cheers.
All right, see ya.
See ya.
The time is 11:48 a.m. The date is Wednesday, 28th of May, 2025. Concluded conversation with ex-Risdon prison guard, and we'll be meeting him on the 11th to follow up on discussions about Martin Bryant's torture and treatment in Risdon Prison. Very, very valuable person to speak to.
Worryingly, since this second conversation was held and an arrangement was made for a date to meet where the whistleblower agreed to be interviewed on camera and to provide further additional information regarding the allegations of torture, all communication has somehow ceased. Despite multiple attempts to contact this person by both phone and email, there has been zero response. This is of concern to me that outside influence may have been placed on this person not to continue with their testimony. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Wasp Files. New episodes will be uploaded every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Feel free to share far and wide, and please see the links to the Dropbox files and information relating to the episodes. Also, without any obligation, please see the Buy Me a Coffee campaign, which helps keep the channel running and also provides profits to my friends who are survivors from Port Arthur who have supported me on this journey. Thank you.